As you know, and as we've been talking about for a number of months now, we have some initiatives going on with looking at how we allocate deer licenses in South Dakota. This is a very important topic to a lot of hunters. I believe we have 70,000 deer hunters in South Dakota, and as you might suspect, each of them has a strong feeling on how we should be allocating licenses. This topic really sets the stage for me to mention to what Secretary Hepler said at the onset of the meeting here. I was at the Interim Rules Committee on Monday, presented the rules that you adopted at your meeting in Aberdeen. Meeting went well, rules were approved, but was really gratifying is the accolades that you received from the committee members. And those accolades were in particular related to the snare proposals and how that ended up. And they just were very complimentary of the way that you run the public process, the way you take public comment and the concerns that you hear into consideration when you make your final decisions. And that was voiced by a couple different members. So it wasn't just one. So I say that now because, again, this sets the stage for another difficult decision. And today is a decision point for the Commission on what we do from here forward. We have some alternatives on the table for you to contemplate in moving this issue forward and taking us on to the next level of discussion when it comes to public input on these alternatives that we have available to us to ultimately get back to what Kevin mentioned earlier, and that's to provide an opportunity for people to recreate the state. And in this case, it's an opportunity or an idea to expand the equitability of that opportunity to more participants. But it's not going to come without a bit more angst, a lot more emotional discussions, some of which we've already heard. I know you're being contacted on that now. But a great deal of work has gone into this concept at this point. Kevin, along with Dr. Longmire, have been on the road show, contact a lot of individuals, and it actually has been refreshing to hear the results of some of those discussions, that as people get educated, how they open their mind maybe a little bit to that there could be some alternatives out there that could improve the system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin to present a few more of those details, and then we'll get on to discussion of the proposal or the recommendation for a proposal that we have for your consideration.
Thank you, Tony. Kevin Oberlin here, Special Projects Coordinator. There's going to be a lot of information here that I'm going to be presenting to you today. Mr. Chairman, if 10 o'clock rolls around and we're still in the middle of the presentation, please let me know so we can get the public hearing started. Again, the handout that Rachel just passed out is the presentation. I want to make sure you folks have that information available to you because there is going to be a lot of numbers we're going to cover here in the next 20-25 minutes. So with that, if there's questions, please feel free to interject throughout the slides, and we're going to get started. So in 2017, the unique number of firearm deer applicants we had apply for the 6 firearm seasons, which include West River deer, East River deer, Black Hills deer, muzzleloader deer, refuge deer, and CSP deer. You can see there, this would also include special buck. Total number of applications that applied for one of those 6 seasons, 7 seasons if you include special buck, which is included, 35,140. You go down to the number of applicants that applied for 2, you look at about 11,561. Number of applicants that applied for 3, 3,800. 4, 1,400. 5, 476. 6, this is the number of folks that applied for 6 licenses that I just mentioned, firearm licenses for 6 different seasons, 148. And those that applied for all 6, including special buck, 20. At the end of the day, we have 52,633 unique deer applicants in 2017. These are the firearm deer applicants. For how many licenses? Right around 35,522. And we'll get into more of those numbers here in the next couple slides. So looking at deer applicants from 2009 to 2017, how many folks have been applying since 2009? And in 2008, we actually did a conversion in our licensing system that compiled or combined user IDs. So I would like to pull this data earlier than that, but there has been some duplicates in our system pre-2009. So I pulled 2009 to 2017, and I ran a logistic regression to that analysis. And if you look 20 years down the road at the decrease we're experiencing in the last 9 years, we'll be at 44,000 deer applicants in 2038. If you look in the next 50 years, if model projections are correct, and I'll be the first to admit every model can be wrong, we're looking at 21,000 deer applicants in the next 50 years. Supply is not meeting demand, and thus demand is decreasing in a sense. Folks are unsuccessful numerous years in a row. We are seeing that we are losing deer applicants, and there's no doubt we are. I mean, we had a high of 59,000, and in even previous years, 2005 and 6, our data suggests 65, 70,000. We're now at about 52,000 unique firearm deer applicants. This is just firearm. And you can see there that trend line is on a declining slope, and those model projections there are indicating, we need to be well aware of what might be to come. So next slide here looks at unique firearm deer applicants' age. I used similar age brackets that Scott Simpson used for his analysis that we presented to you earlier this morning. However, I did break out youth, 12 to 17-year-olds. And if you look at age, there's 6 years in 12 to 17. There's 13 different age categories in 18 to 30. And I wanted to make sure the data set was comparable across, because if you were to just lump these different age categories, they're not comparable, because you have 6 years in one, 13 years in another, 10 years and 31 to 40. So what I did there is I took the average number of applicants per age. So what this is suggesting, there's 752 12-year-olds, 752 13-year-olds, 752 14-year-olds, and so forth and so on. All right, the number of applicants within each age bracket, 4,500, 12 to 17-year-olds, and so on and so forth down the list. And at the end of the day, you can see here, the majority of our deer hunters' age is 31 to 40-year-olds in that age category. We have about 1,027 of those folks that are 31, 32, 33 within each one of those age categories, to get a total cumulative amount of 10,268 folks that hunt deer in this state that are between 31 and 40. So again, I wanted to smooth this data set out to make sure they were comparable across years. In order to do so, I had to run some averages there. That might be a hair bit confusing, but if there's questions on that, let me know. Our oldest deer hunter in the book's 97. He's 97 years old, bought a license last year, so kind of neat stuff to throw out there. But any questions on that? You can see there that peak is right around that 30 to 40-year-old mark. Yes, sir. Actually, nationally, this data set here, we have a fairly young contingent of deer hunters. We're looking a lot better than some other states. A lot of times you'll see a national graph, this 50 to 60-year-old might be way up here, the baby boomers. We do have some pretty good recruitment coming in as far as 31 to 40-year-olds. There'll be some more interesting information on the next slide as well, but all in all, this isn't a bad story to tell, as far as those coming up replacing those that we're losing. So, that in 2017, the number of unique...
Kevin.
Yes, sorry.
Comment.
Just a comment.
My apologies.
That is a very good slide to see that our young are as active as our older, and that isn't what we hear all the time nationally. So I think that's something really to celebrate. Absolutely.
Yes, very good point, Commissioner Peterson. Thank you for that. Digging even further into some of the age breakdowns, the number of unique firearm deer applicants who applied for one season. Now this is looking at those age categories and breaking those folks out that applied for just one season. Okay, one of the 6 seasons we've talked about earlier, those firearm seasons. You can see here our youth, 12 to 17-year-olds, 74% of those folks applied for one season, all right, of those 4,511. You go down the list, 70%, 18 to 30-year-olds applied for one season. 31 to 40-year-olds, They're the real active group. 62% only applied for one season. So 38% applied for multiple seasons in the age category 31 to 40. And there's about 10,000 of those folks. You know, and you can kind of see as age increases, the number of licenses you apply for decreases. So 71-plus-year-olds, 74% applied for one season. Some pretty interesting statistics if you are really interested in seeing what age category are those folks that are applying for multiple seasons. And you can see then again, it's those 31 to 40-year-olds and 41 to 50-year-olds. Any questions on that? Okay, so looking at 2017 application success. Across all of these seasons, East River Deer, which includes Special Buck, West River Deer, which includes Special Buck, Black Hills Deer, Muzzleloader Refuge, and CSP, our average success rate across the board is 46%. But if you had, these are the successful applicants in the first draw, first choice, about 59% in East River Deer, 56% West River Deer, 30% Black Hills Deer, Muzzleloader 13%, Refuge 14%, and CSP 3%. So if you throw all the names in one hat for West River Deer, East River Deer, and their following seasons, those are the success rates of drawing those licenses. And there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, we have, different draw categories, 2+ preference points, 1+ preference points, 0 preference points. We're cubing those, so preference obviously plays a role in if you're successful or not. But if you throw all those names in the hat, if you have 10 preference points or 1, those are the odds of drawing those licenses.
Mr. Chairman, Kathy Peterson, how does that include those that are applying for their 2 favorite spots and getting success on both of them then?
Yes.
Okay. Yes,
and that will actually be on the next slide. So this would include the number of applicants that applied for multiple seasons that were successful. So 2017 firearm application success of those 6 seasons once again. So if I'm a hunter and I applied for one season, I'm one of those 35,140. If I'm a hunter and applied for 3 or more seasons, I'm one of the 5,932. Okay? Now, what we're looking at here is the number of folks that were successful, and I'm defining success by drawing at least one first choice license. So if you're a person that applies for one license, your chance of drawing a license in this regard, if you pool all these seasons, is 56%. If you're an applicant that applies for 2 or more licenses in the first draw, first choice, your draw odds are 69%. Those folks that put in for 3 or more applications, 79% of them at least drew one first choice license. So, somebody could tell or say to me, and I've heard this a lot, well, why don't folks just put in for more licenses? Because their chances do go up. The more licenses you put in for, the higher probability of drawing a license really is, and that's very apparent in this chart here. And I'll be honest to say that there are the vast majority, almost 70% of all our deer hunters in this state only apply for one deer license every single year. So, we might think that there's a lot of them out there that apply for 3 or more. I'm one of them. I apply for all 6 every year. I'm guilty of that. But, there's only 5,932 of us. So at the end of the day, looking at the 55,622 applicants, this number here represents the vast minority. Okay, so that's some of the background information. I did pull data from 2015, 16, and 17, and it looks very similar to this, to all these charts and graphs that I showed you here today. So if you're wondering how those other years look, they almost mirror this data set here. That's why I did not include 3-year averages. I could if that was a request by the Commission. So now, this question's been up in the air for quite a long time. I had a staff member tell me we've been dealing with this for the last 20 years, actually. Emmett Keyser back there informed me of that. And there's been a lot of discussion around this. And in 2014, we sent out a very detailed survey to our hunters, our landowners. And this survey, was sent out to 6,000 plus folks. You can see the response rate there, about 4,000 responded. One of the questions we asked is increasing hunters' chances of drawing at least one buck license. The vast majority supported that concept, 71%. So that was kind of, some pretty strong data that suggested folks would like a better chance at drawing their preferred buck license. And during the development of the deer management plan, there were several social management considerations that were identified. And I tell you, this one came up time and time again. The one that received considerable attention, the most attention from the public, was deer license allocation. And that is definitely a true statement, because I was a big part of that deer management plan, and we heard that a lot at the focus groups, or the stakeholder group, my apology, and just throughout the commission process and throughout the comment period. Deer license allocation was brought up repeatedly. So the commission work group consisted of Commissioner Phillips and Commissioner Olson, tasked the department, along with other commissioners, to evaluate potential alternatives to the current license allocation process that would potentially increase the number of hunters who draw their preferred deer license. This is very important. This is the take-home message that I really stress at those focus groups. We're not trying to limit the number of buck licenses an individual can get. We're not trying to limit opportunity. We're just trying to distribute those buck licenses or those preferred licenses to more hunters and get more hunters their preferred buck license. So that was the whole goal, is to, evaluate potential alternatives that would increase the potential to increase the number of hunters who draw the preferred deer license. Can't stress that enough. So how do we go about this? It was a long, lengthy process, I'll be honest with you. We started now quite some time ago. It would have been back August of 2017. We met, the department staff had a work group, internal work group met, and we developed numerous alternatives to the current license allocation system. We had about a 30-member work group, and I tell you, that day was a brainstorming session. We probably had 30 or 40 different ideas floating around. At the end of the day, we came up with a list of 4, and those 4 alternatives were presented to the deer management stakeholder group in December of 2017. That list of alternatives was then narrowed down to 3, and those 3 alternatives, 1, 2, and 3 being no change, are the ones everybody here are most familiar with. And then we took it on the road. The big part of this was public involvement. A big part of this was outreach and education. And that's exactly what Cindy Longmire and I did, is we took it to 9 different focus groups across the state, and we'll present those findings here next. Public involvement, qualitative design. And really what that comes down to is, what do people think? And what are those reoccurring themes, if you will. We had a target population of deer applicants 18 years and older. We sent them an invitation. We drew a sample, or we actually made a request to 50,000 plus folks. We sent an email to 50,000 plus deer hunters that were drawn from a 2017 licensing database. And we asked them to participate in focus groups that discussed this in great detail. And those focus groups, the locations of those were in Pierre, Phillip, Yankton, Sioux Falls, Watertown, Aberdeen, Belle Fourche, Rapid City, and Mitchell. So we wanted to have a broad spectrum across the entire state and represent, the entire state, and give folks an opportunity to participate in their hometowns. And we also furthermore did an online video and a questionnaire, because at the end of the day we couldn't invite all the folks that were willing to participate in the focus group. So we wanted to have a secondary option for those folks to have an opportunity to express their opinion, listen to a video, an online video, and then at the end of it there was an online survey. So this was a self-selected sample, and it was not designed for generalizability. And what that means is, the sample we have, as far as the focus groups and the online video, does not statistically represent deer hunters as far as the number of folks that applied for 1 license, 2 licenses, 3 licenses, or more. And I'll go into greater detail on that in a second, because of the fact it was a self-selected process. And what I mean by that is, we asked, and those folks had an opportunity to respond, and the ones that we responded likely were the folks that got 3 or more buck licenses on an annual basis. And we'll get into more of those details here in just a bit. So, we had 780 deer hunters interested in attending the focus groups. That's how many responded to the email that went out to 50,000+ folks. At the end of the day, again, like I said, it was a self-selected sample. They came to us. They wanted to participate. They wanted to hear more about this. We invited 45 hunters per location. At the end of the day, we got about, on average, 25 attendees per location. The random draw of interested hunters, and it was a random draw of interested hunters, and that is something we need to continue emphasizing. The purpose of the focus groups, a couple reasons. 2-way discussion, group interaction. There was a ton of questions and a ton of Q&A and a ton of back and forth. used to help identify attitudes and reactions towards potential alternatives. And that was the whole intent. Here's a meeting we were having up in Aberdeen. You can see there, there was a good turnouts. There was. And most meetings we had 30, 32, 34. There were some meetings. We had a meeting in Phillip. I believe there was only 13 there. That was our lowest attendance. So objectives: provide draw statistics and information. Some of the statistics I just provided you earlier. Discuss potential alternatives. Receive feedback on alternatives. And we also gave the participants a mock application. That mock application, you'll see the data from that here in just a bit, but that is a very, very important component to draw simulations and draw projections that, okay, if this system was implemented, what are the probabilities of drawing a license now versus if we were to change the system? So we needed data to do so, and we needed some modeling information to do so, so that is how we achieved those objectives, was through those mock applications. Online video was very similar to the focus group discussion. The presentation was almost identical. However, there was no question and answer. At the end of the day there, the objective was to pretty much the same with no mock application. There was no opportunity for two-way discussion. However, over 600 hunters did click on the video, watch the video, and filled out the survey at the end. So we had some pretty good public involvement. Participation across the board, 227 participants. Now here's the breakdown of those folks that applied for 1 license, 2 license, or 3 or more license. The focus group, 17% typically applied for 1 license. This was a question we asked them. 20% typically applied for 2 licenses, and 63% typically applied for 3 or more. You compare that to the 2017 applicants, 67, 22, and 11. 67% typically applied for 1 license, compared to 17% that attended the focus group. So again, that's that self-selected process. It's not a true representation across the board of all deer hunters. And I just want to make that clear because that was the same message we received on the online survey. 616 participants, that should say online survey, my apologies. 26% typically applied for 1 license, 26% typically applied for 2 licenses, and then 48% of the participants that responded to the online survey typically applied for 3 or more licenses. This is very important because take these percentages, compare them to what we see in 2017, those unique deer applicants, the 52,633 folks that applied for a firearm license in 2017. They are different. All right, some results. I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, but they are in your packets. There'll be time to review those packets after the meeting as well and answer any questions as well after the meeting. So, online survey, those folks that took the online survey that had 1 license, opposed, support, neither. Opposed is going to be in blue throughout the next few slides. Support is in green. If you had 1 license, there was 46% of the folks supported alternative 1. If you had 2, 48% of the folks supported alternative 2. And if you had 3 or more licenses, that's where you start seeing things drop off. The opposed goes up, the support goes down with 3 or more licenses. And again, we had 295 folks take the online survey that had 3 or more licenses. Focus groups, those folks that supported alternative 1, we had 62%. The folks that had 1 license, there was 39 of those folks out of the 223 attendees, or those folks that at least took the mock application in the survey. Those folks that had 2 licenses in a typical year, you can see here, opposed 48, support 46. 3 or more, 142 of those folks that attended the focus groups, 57% opposed, 36% supported. If you look at alternative 2, kind of similar trend, very similar trend. If you have 1 license, you support change. With 2 here with the focus groups, the online, this is the focus groups now on top. You can see there, opposition with 2 or more, opposed 50%, 3 or more, 70% of those folks that attended the focus groups opposed alternative 2. That's 142 folks there. We had 28% support alternative 2 if you had 3 or more licenses. Now remember, 3 or more licenses, again, represents 11% of all of our deer hunters. Okay, online survey. Those folks that purchased on a typical year 1 license, 161 of those, 47% opposed alternative 2, 38% supported. You look at number 2 here, those folks that have 2 licenses, 57% opposed, 39 supported, and so forth and so on. Most preferred. Now this is the question we asked on the survey. If you had to pick, which alternative would you pick? We asked them that question. We didn't ask them if they supported or opposed it. We just asked them what their most preferred alternative was. Now, if we're looking at the focus groups, we have alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 3 in green. And those folks that supported alternative 1, you can see here were 26% that had one license, 46% supported alternative 2, and 28% most preferred was alternative 3. Okay, alternative 3 again is no change. If you had 2 or more licenses, you can see the bar graphs there. I'm not going to go through all those in great detail. Now, looking at the online survey, again, alternative 1, those folks that only applied for one license, those 160 folks that took the survey, 30% of them preferred alternative 1, 50% of them preferred no change, okay, and so forth and so on. So, to sum it all up, those are a lot of bar graphs, so I wanted to have kind of a summary slide of all those. Focus groups. And what I mean by this, we're asking them, what's your preferred choice? Alternative 1 and 2, I call change. So if they prefer change, 46% of the focus group attendees preferred change. 43% of the folks that took the online survey preferred change. And there you see the no change. 54% no change, 57% no change. Okay, but then if you break that out and those folks that typically apply for one season, you have 72% preferred change. From the focus groups, you have 50% of the online respondents preferred change. I'll be honest with you, we look at a lot of these results and you put CIs around all of them and error bars around all of them, we're split right down the middle. That's really the take-home message here. 50%, I mean, we couldn't get more split as folks that want change or want to leave it the way it is. So that was some of the results from the rigorous public involvement that we went through as a department. You know, the mock application information it really was useful, and I believe Rachel passed out a handout here that looks like this, and I'm going to go over that here in just a bit. Is it 10 o'clock yet? Do I have a little time?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So what we did here with the mock applications, we had 223 focus participants fill out a mock application, and what we did there is we asked them, if you had to make a choice, what would your preferred season be between those 3 seasons, Black Hills Deer, East River Deer, West River Deer? Because at the end of the day, model simulations can't occur unless we know what people's preferred choices are. That's one of the most critical unknowns with all of this. I really don't know what their preferred choices would be if they had to pick a preferred choice. But now we shed some light on that with some of these mock applications. Black Hills Deer, 16% of those focus group participants said they'd choose Black Hills, 37% they'd choose East River, and 46% said they would choose West River Deer as their preferred choice season. Now, to take that even further, we have 6 seasons on the list. Again, this does include Special Buck. A Special Buck is a unit within West River Deer and a unit within East River Deer. You can see here 14% preferred Black Hills, 5% CSP, 33% East River, 9% muzzleloader, 1% refuge, and 37% of those folks that took that mock application said West River Deer would be their preferred season. Any questions on that? This chart here is really important for the next couple slides, because what we do with this is then we break out those folks that applied for multiple seasons in the last 5-10 years and say, all right, now they're in this draw pool instead of all the draw pools. And that we'll see on this next slide right here. So, draw projections. In 2017, over here, that first column, one season, the people that applied for one season for East River Deer, there was 22,000. So they didn't apply for any other season. They only applied for East River Deer. There was about 22,000 of those folks. Those folks that only applied for West River Deer, there was about 8,600 of those folks. And those folks that only applied for Black Hills Deer, there was 4,300 of those folks. At the end of the day, we have about 35,000 people that only applied for one season in 2017 of those 3 seasons. Okay, so the mock application then, the preferred choice, we still have 17,196 folks that applied for multiple seasons, two or more of those seasons, or a combination of East River Deer, West River, Black Hills. So the mock application proportions, those folks that picked, this here, the 16%, 37%, 46%, we broke that 17,196 up to figure out where their names would be in the draw hats, in the draw buckets. And here's where it broke out. About 6,400 folks would go in that East River draw, 7,900 folks would go in the West River draw, and 2,800 folks would go in the Black Hills draw. And that again then it equates to that 17,196 resident hunters that applied for a combination of East River deer, West River deer, Black Hills deer in 2017. Important concept to grasp. So what we end up with then is our projected applicants, 28,000 for East River deer, about 17,000 for West River deer, and 7,000 for Black Hills deer, gives us that 52,000 mark again. In 2017, here are the applicants we had in those draws. 32,000 for East River deer, 20,000 for West River deer, and 13,339 for Black Hills deer. Okay, so if you look at across these two columns, the difference there is how many names you're taking out of those draw buckets. I'll call them draw buckets. And at the end of the day, we're taking about 13,750 names out of the draw buckets or draw hats, and gets us these new projected applicants, that number. So we had 65,814 names in the draw buckets for these 3 seasons. Now we have 52,059. Successful applicants in 2017, there that number is right there. 2017 overall success, 59% for East River deer, 56% for West River deer, and Black Hills deer, 30%. Same percent breakdowns I showed you earlier. Projected success, we have then, because we took names out of the draw hats, we go from 59 to 67 for East River deer. We go from 56 to 68 for West River deer. And for Black Hills deer, we go from 30 to 56% success. Questions on that table? Because the next table, it gets to be a little more complicated because of the fact we're adding 3 more seasons. I know there's a lot of numbers here. You guys are doing great. And we'll have plenty of time to go through questions at the end and more to
in
come.
all
Yes,
instances, though, it increased the chances of getting your first choice there.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
the person that wants the traditional East River person that gets a license for home and then likes to go out to the Black Hills, they won't consider that success because they only got their one. And how would are we going to go forward as how we can give them a chance to get the second? Am I just asking a question too soon?
No, that's a great question, and we will get into that a little bit, but it all is dependent upon which unit they put in for, because there will be leftovers.
Okay.
There will be leftovers in that third draw, and we can get into that in the next few slides. But, you know, if they put in for 2 really hard to draw units, 1 East River and 1 West River, likely won't draw both.
Right.
But the chances of them drawing their first choice in the first draw for East River in this example would go up. Would go up for sure.
Sure, I can see that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm up against the clock, so we'll go through this slide and then we'll have our public hearing at 10, and then we'll get back into the commission proposals. But to keep everything kind of flowing here, we just got off this last table. This table's very similar, like I said, though we are adding muzzleloader refuge CSP. Here are the number of folks in 2017 that applied for 1 deer season, or they only applied for these seasons. Okay, so again, there's 35,340 people that only applied for 1 season in this regard. So we still have 17,235 folks that applied for 2 or more first draw licenses that included some combination of those 6 seasons. All right, so then what we did there, kind of same concept. We took that mock application proportion of those folks that preferred those seasons, and then we broke that 17,235 into applicants. Where would those folks go? What pool or what draw would their names be in? And here are the draw names at the end of the day after the extrapolations are made. Projected applicants. We go from 32,000 projected applicants for East River deer to 27,635. You know, we go from 20,400 to 14,954 for West River deer. Black Hills, substantial changes. We go from 13,339 applicants in 2017 to 6,700. Muzzleloader, 7,800 to 2,000. Refuge, we go from 1,100 to 270. And then CSP, we go from 2,400 down to about 1,000. So you can see there, once we take 24,600 names out of the hat, out of the draw buckets, substantially increasing projected success is what the result is. So the successful applicants, that number doesn't change. You'll see the top 3 numbers there, right here. Those are the same numbers you see in this table because the number of licenses will not change. And that still remains a constant. However, the number of applicants in each pool will change. So 2017 overall success rates. You can see them there. Overall, 46%. Projected success by going with alternative 2, making folks choose between those 6 seasons. You can see some of the substantial changes now. Black Hills deer goes from 30 to 59. West River goes from 56 to 76. And East River deer goes from 59 to 69. More substantial changes, 13% muzzleloader all the way up to 49%. Fourfold, essentially, is what you see there. Refuge deer, 14% in 2017 success. Projections suggest 59%. CSP, still going to be tough to draw. We went from 3% in 2017 up to 7%. So the take-home message is, alternative 2 substantially does increase draw probabilities. And that is something we can talk more about in the proposal portion of the meeting. And then with that, we'll just end it right here for now, and then we'll get to our public hearing. So,
Okay. Sounds good. Get your question. Come back to order. And Kevin, if you want to continue on with the deer license allocation issue.
yeah, yep. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Secretary Hepler. Kevin Roblin here again, Special Projects Coordinator with Game Fish and Parks. Where we kind of left off here is we looked over the data, and Rachel's handing out some of the main tables we wanted to emphasize. Please review those tables, and if there's any questions on those tables, they're the same tables that are in the presentation. They're just larger and easier to read. And if there's any questions on those, I'd be glad to answer those. Otherwise, I'd like to jump into the proposal portion of the meeting. And there's 2 proposals on the agenda, deer license allocation being one of them. And that's kind of where we would like to go next with this discussion. So throughout all the data that I presented here on the presentation and throughout the focus groups and throughout the online survey, the goal continues to be getting folks the preferred deer license. That has been the goal. That has been the reason why, the department chose the alternatives they did to move forward. And at the end of the day, you'll see on this slide the department recommendation is alternative 2. And if you want to move to or open your books to page, page 9, that's where we're at in commission booklets. And you'll see there the recommended changes from the current drawing structure would be alternative B, which is alternative 2, which requires an individual to select their most preferred license from the 6 seasons in the first draw. And the reason the department went this route is if you go back to this table right here, and this is the table with the simulated draw projections looking at how this could potentially increase success of those deer applicants for those seasons if those folks that apply currently for 2 licenses were forced or had to choose or preferred to choose one season, what seasons would they prefer? And then you can see here this alternative 2 would make the most difference pertaining to the increase in draw probabilities. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why the department has recommended alternative 2, because it is our goal to get more people in the field and get more people their preferred deer license. And alternative 2 does that over alternative 1 based on some draw simulations and draw projections. There's some more follow-up information and the supportive information on this proposal sheet. We can go through that, but I think I covered most of that already. Couple things, or one thing I would like just to quickly review for those listening in and for those in the audience, and I know the Commission's been presented this information already regarding what alternative 2 is and the details of it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just going to brush over it real quickly, but here's the recommended proposal, which is alternative 2, pick from 6 seasons. And those 6 seasons would include East River Deer, West River Deer, Black Hills, National Wildlife Refuge, Custer State Park, and muzzleloader. And, instead of having 6 separate applications, there'd be 1 application, and folks would have to make a preferred choice from those 6. Special buck is included. Special buck would be included in West River Deer and East River Deer. And there would be a total of 4 lottery draws. Okay? I'm going to go through these real quick. The first draw, like I said, they'd have to make a choice. Residents and non-residents. This would apply to non-residents. The same stipulations would occur. Those areas that have an 8% allocation, West River, Black Hills, National Wildlife Refuge only, would have that 8% allocation. Those folks, those non-residents, would have to choose between those 3 seasons with alternative 2. Getting into the second draw, this is an important piece of information to emphasize that only individuals that did not receive a first draw license would be eligible to apply for a second draw license. This is how the system is ran today. This would not be a change from today's system. They're in the second draw. Only those folks, the eligible folks, are those folks that did not draw a license in the first draw. Non-residents, same concept applies at 8%. The third draw, this is where things get a lot different than our current system. It's very, very important to emphasize the fact that this third draw, residents, including residents successful in the first or second draw, would have the opportunity to apply for a first and second choice across the combinations of those 6 seasons. Today, the third draw, we pool licenses for residents and non-residents. This third draw, we would not be pooling the licenses. What would be available here is what's left over after the second draw. So those residents that have a license from the first or second draw could pick up a second license. So to answer your question, Kathy, if there's leftovers, only residents would have the opportunity at those leftovers in this third draw period. Now, the non-residents would only have the opportunity to pick up licenses that were originally allocated from that 8%. So if that allocation of that 8%, if there's still leftovers in that third draw, those non-residents only have the opportunity to go after those original allocated 8% of those licenses. This is a really big difference from our current system. We added another draw tier into our system so we'd give residents an opportunity to pick up a leftover license and not compete with non-residents, because there will be more leftover licenses if this system is implemented in the future. So any questions on that third draw? That's a very important thing to emphasize. The fourth draw would then, I'm sorry, Kathy, did you have a question?
On the special buck, then that would just be a choice versus getting a special buck and then doing this.
Yes, great question. Special buck would be, think of special buck as a unit within East River Deer or a unit within West River Deer. So if an individual chose special buck as their preferred choice, that would be their choice, their first choice. That would suffice for their 1 application in the first draw. Special buck would.
Can you explain for us again, a refresher, what special buck is currently?
Yes, absolutely. So in South Dakota, we have 500 East River resident-only special buck licenses. And sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but not by a whole lot. There is a floor, there is a cap. But at the end of the day, it's right around that 500 mark, East River. West River, there are 500 non-resident and 500 resident licenses, West River. So that special buck license is at an increased fee. It's a private land only license, and that's something that we need to emphasize. That license is only valid on private land. It's not a public land license. So that would be kind of where we're at with special buck across the state. And like I said, it can jump around from that 500 mark up and down a little bit. It can't go below 500. So, okay, getting into that fourth draw. Licenses remaining in the fourth draw period would be pooled and made available to both residents and non-residents across the combinations of those 6 seasons. So this fourth draw in the proposed alternative would be essentially the third draw today. Again, we're adding a draw tier to the draw structure to give those residents an opportunity to pick up leftover licenses before they're pooled and made available to non-residents as well. Leftovers, after the fourth draw period, remaining licenses would be issued first come, first serve. And that's exactly how our fourth draw, or our leftovers after the third draw is today. So, again, we're adding a tier. leftovers, first come, first served. There is no limit on the number of licenses an individual can have in that leftover. Once we do hit the leftovers, there is no limit per individual hunter as far as how many licenses they can pick up. Okay, so here's some real important similarities across both alternatives and maybe some differences or some similarities across our current system. Just real points I want to emphasize. Preference point system would remain in place and you would not lose your current accumulated preference. Also, in those same lines, individuals could continue accumulating preference for other seasons beside their first choice. So let's say my first choice is West River Deer. I could still buy an East River Deer, Black Hills preference point, a CSP preference point, a muzzleloader preference point, and a refuge deer preference point. You know, as long as my first choice is West River Deer, the idea there is, the opportunity to accumulate preference will still be there. So in 4 or 5 years from now, when I have 5 muzzleloader points, I could put that as my first choice, and my chances of drawing that muzzleloader license are pretty high at that time. So that opportunity to accumulate preference will still be there. That opportunity not to lose preference will still be there. We are not taking preference away from anybody. Obviously, in 2015, those preference points became something they had to purchase, and they're their preference points. There has been discussion to allow users the opportunity to check a box and use preference point as their, for their second choice, or even in the second draw to check the box and say, use my preference for my second choice, or in the second draw say, use my preference, or even in the third draw. So there has been those discussions, and folks at the focus groups thought that was a pretty good idea, where they would like the opportunity to use their preference in subsequent draws beside the first draw, because that would increase their odds of drawing a license in the long run. So that would be something more we could discuss in greater detail. Landowner preference would remain unchanged. That 50% allocation, there's no change proposed here that would change landowner preference. One thing to note, however, is landowners would not be able to use landowner preference in more than one season. So a landowner couldn't use landowner preference for both a West River unit and an East River unit at the same time. You'd have to pick one or the other. However, a landowner could get a landowner-owned land tag East River and then put West River as their first choice. So if they hunt their own land, wherever that might be, they could still apply for a first choice somewhere else. No changes would be made to archery and youth deer application. There was a lot of discussion on archery. There was internally and with the public. Should archery be included? At this time, it's not. The opportunities with archery is great in this state. I mean, there's approximately 23,000 archers in South Dakota. They harvest, roughly around 7,000 animals a year. That opportunity is great at the expense of very few animals being harvested, so biologically it is insignificant. However, there is those discussions still on the table pertaining to archery, and we can further answer any of those questions if you'd like. Individuals who received a special buck license would not be eligible to apply until the third draw period. This was something that Commissioner Peterson mentioned, and I wanted to allude on that a little bit more as well, that special buck is included in this package. That's something very important. Everybody here needs to realize and understand that special buck would be a unit within East River Deer and a unit within West River Deer. All drawings, including special buck, would occur at the same time. This would be a big change. The drawing time period for special buck would likely have to be moved back. I'm not sure when that date would be, but I'll tell you, as a deer biologist in my old life, I'll call it, we really don't get those harvest data until March, April time frame, and that's one of the reasons why our draws are later, because we get a lot of those survey cards back, and we want to make sure we have a statistically valid harvest estimate before we make recommendations to the commission. So special buck would be moved back, and likely East River Deer, muzzleloader, and all those others that are in September would be moved up. And I can't give you an exact date, but I would say sometime in June would be when the draws would be. It might even be May, but that would have to be a structure change with the commission process. All drawings would occur at the same time. Group applications would still be an available option. That's something that we heard time and time again from the focus groups. There was concern over that they want to make sure there was still an opportunity to apply as a group. And that would still be the case as long as everybody in that group put in first choice, first draw, that same group number, same as they have to do today. So non-resident license allocation would remain the same and be set at 8% of the available resident licenses for West River Deer, Black Hills National Wildlife Refuge. One concern we've heard from folks a lot was the fact that will this generate, more non-resident licenses or more non-resident opportunity in South Dakota? And one of the responses to that was throwing that third draw in there. That is a big change where we're giving residents an opportunity to pick up those leftovers before they're pooled and made available to non-residents. I can't guarantee one way or another if there'll be more non-resident licenses left over or not, because I'm not exactly sure how many leftover licenses there will be come after that third draw. But I can assure you that we would take a hard look at that. There's no doubt we would look at that very closely and all of this very closely and evaluate the process as we move forward, if we move forward with change. Applicants can only apply for one season as a first choice. That is essentially what we've been talking about all morning. That would be a big change, obviously. Only one season's preference points can be used in the first draw. Again, there would not be an opportunity to use preference from all 6 of those seasons in the first draw. You'd have to make that preferred choice. If a person is unsuccessful in the first draw, they likely will not be able to draw a hard-to-draw license in the second or third draw. And this is real. There's 27 units in the state that are 27 license types in the state that takes 2 or more preference points to draw right now in 2017. Last year, in 2016, there was 30. So some of those units takes 5 years to draw. Some take 8 or 9 because we do not have a true preference. Draw probabilities they're not black and white, if you will. They're probabilities, they're not guarantees because we do not have a true preference system. But at the end of the day, those 27 or 30 units where it does take 2 or more preference points, the chances of drawing one in the second draw are probably not very good. So a hard-to-draw unit, if you're unsuccessful in the first draw, there will be very few left, if you will. So, for example, Black Hills deer. That's a hard-to-draw unit right now. You can draw it with 2 points, and some people draw it with 1 point for whitetail. For any deer, you need about 5 to 10 points. And so if you don't draw, let's say your West River license in the first draw, your chances of drawing a Black Hills any deer tag are slim to none. I'll just say none because of the fact there likely will not be any of those left over come the second draw. Something very important to emphasize. And then lastly, deer applications deadlines will change, and we went over that in pretty good detail already. But those are some main points that I wanted to emphasize, and those are some main points I covered at all those focus groups. There was discussion, questions, and answers amongst all those bullet points there on that slide. So with that, public involvement continues to be a very high priority to the department. It does. We went above and beyond something we've never done before with these focus groups, 9 of them across the state. Cindy Longmire's really helped a lot in that process, and I thank her for that. The data we received, from the mock applications, none of this stuff would be possible without that data as far as trying to project how this might change your draw probabilities or the draw statistics moving forward. I thank all those folks that did attend those focus groups. Your input was very, very useful. It was. We had some good discussions, some heated discussions at times, and I surely and truly appreciate their participation. Lastly, no changes would be made until the 2019 deer season. That's something we've been saying time and time again. Obviously, our 2018 season's right around the corner. None of this would be implemented if change was to occur until the 2019 deer season. And we continue to encourage folks to get engaged and reach out to the department. I take a lot of calls on this almost daily, and I encourage that. These discussions, they're good to have because there are a lot of passionate deer hunters in this state. I'm one of them, and we encourage those folks to reach out and continue talking with the commission and the department staff, and hopefully we can answer any questions they might have. We also strongly encourage the deer hunters to continue checking the department's website, social media pages, and targeted emails for updates on all deer-related issues and recommendations. The presentation I gave here today, I'd like to post that on our website so folks have an opportunity to review that. I'll work with the communications staff to make sure that all of this information is available to folks, for folks to review, and to help everybody, you know, with the opinion and making an informed decision. And again, we're all about an open and transparent public process, and we cannot stress that enough with this department. So with that, are there any questions? I know this is a lot of information. That's why I wanted to make sure you had that handout in front of you. And I'll take questions at this time.
Okay, thanks, Kevin, I know you've put a ton of time into this thing, taken a lot of input, and we appreciate that, because this is a monumental change in the way we're going to go forward from here. One thing I didn't notice anything in here. Is this from here forward forever, or what? Is there any kind of a time limit? Maybe you could speak to that. Are we going to reevaluate sometime, or?
Yeah, great question, Mr. Chairman. There would definitely be an evaluation period. So the deer management plan is going to be up for revision in 2022. And if we were to implement change, it would be great to have 3 years worth of data to really see how that impacts, how this new process or draw structure would impact draw probabilities. So we look at data from 2019, 2020, 2021, and we thoroughly review the draw structure in 2022 when that plan revision is up again. It's a 5-year plan. It was just finalized here in July of 2017. So that would be the tentative timeline. If something's broke and not working, we will do all we can to fix it. I mean, that's essentially what we will do and what we plan to do. And there is going to be the first 2 years or the first year of information and data isn't going to be very helpful. It'd be nice to look at it, you know, the first year, but nobody knows the draw probabilities or draw statistics, so it's going to be hard to see what everybody picks. And you know, we have some baseline information as far as what folks' preferred seasons are, but it'd sure be great to have 2 or 3 years worth of data to really thoroughly analyze the process and to see once if it did increase draw probabilities like we think it might.
Okay, good. Are there other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Phillips.
Scott Phillips here. First of all, Kevin, this has been a monumental undertaking, and I'd like to thank you and Cindy and all the department for all the work you've put in. You've put in hours above and beyond the call of duty, and we all appreciate that. I have some questions, a number of them actually. Let's just talk about refuge deer, Custer State Park, and muzzleloader. If we pass the recommendation, alternative 2 or B as it's listed, unless you apply first choice, first draw for muzzleloader, Custer State Park, or refuge, you will not draw one of those tags. Isn't that safe to say?
Yeah, it would be safe to say. I mean, I can't speak 100% for refuge because there's multiple seasons in some of those refuge areas. You know, Sand Lake's one of them. There might not be those tags or licenses left over for the 5th season. There might be some of those left over in the 3rd draw that for folks that got a license in the 1st. But it's probably a fairly safe assumption. I'll speculate here. I don't like speculating a whole lot, but to say that, you know, the CSP, muzzleloader, and refuge, if you were not to put in as a first choice, first draw license in this system, there's a good chance you would not draw it. Yes.
May I?
Continue. Yeah. Continue.
When you look at the projected successes here for the big 3, East River, West River, and Black Hills, they aren't significantly different between the two plans, 67 to 69, 56 to 59. The only exception is West River deer goes from 68 to 76. We're not gaining a tremendous amount by going to B as opposed to alternative 1. And alternative 1 does give some people an opportunity to get a bonus tag or a Christmas present tag, if you'll bear with me. Address that, please, why we're recommending alternative 2 instead of 1.
Absolutely. So, you know, the goal being trying to maximize those hunters to get their preferred license. That continues to be the goal. And if you look at muzzleloader, refuge, and CSP, we make some monumental increases in draw probabilities because of the fact we're taking so many folks out of the draw hat. I mean, if you go from muzzleloader, 13% to 49% is the projection. Refuge 14 to 59, and CSP only goes from 3 to 7. So the department feels fairly strong that if our goal is to get folks their preferred deer license and try to maximize folks getting their preferred deer license, Alternative 2 does a slightly better job of that than Alternative 1. And that is why we move forward with Alternative 2.
Anything else?
I do have one more. Of course, this is an unknown, but I feel the people that apply for Custer State Park, Refuge, and muzzleloader, and generally multiple tags, are our most dedicated deer hunters. They are the ones that are passionate about their sport. They're involved in the sport. They're passionate about hunting, especially deer hunting. And it seems to me like they're the people. Maybe we're taking away their opportunity to give it to somebody who is less passionate about the sport. Is that agree or disagree, Kevin?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there definitely can be that mentality that, and it's not an assumption to say they're our most passionate deer hunters. They are. I mean, they are. They put in for multiple seasons for the reason they love to deer hunt. I mean, that is the reality of it. I love to deer hunt. I put in for all 6 seasons. Why do I put in for all 6? Because I love to deer hunt. So they are, the most passionate users, and they're willing to travel. They're willing to get in their pickup or their car and drive clear across the state and hunt someplace they never hunted before. It's fun to me, but others, there's 35,000 people that aren't willing to do that. But again, if the goal is to get folks their preferred deer license, that's where we come back to Alternative 2. But you're right. I mean, muzzleloader, Refuge, and CSP, that is a Christmas present license to a lot of folks. I use that term actually in the focus groups because it is. I mean, if you draw that, it's like you're winning the lottery. That wouldn't be the case anymore. There is not very many people that only put in for muzzleloader, that only put in for Refuge, that only put in for CSP. Actually, the numbers are on that table in front of you. There's 400 folks that only put in for muzzleloader. There's 38 that only put in for Refuge, and there's 39 that only put in for CSP. So that means the vast majority of the folks that put in for those 3 seasons are putting in for multiple seasons. You can see there was 7,800 applicants for muzzleloader in 2017. And there was only 400 that only put in for muzzleloader. So you're exactly right. Those people that put in for those 3 seasons are applying, multiple places. However, if you were to make them choose, we're taking more names out of the draw bucket or the draw hat, increasing the odds or the probability of folks getting their preferred deer license.
I have one more.
Okay.
I've been involved with the work group and followed the focus group as much as anyone, I guess. And I'm all for change. I support change. I think we need to make a change. I would be more in favor of supporting Alternative 1 than 2. It seems like 2 is a little bit of a bridge too far. That's where I'm at. You can probably convince me. I'm all for change, but right now I'm leaning more to number 1 than 2. If we pass this proposal today, is number 1 too much of a change when we finalize? Can we modify at that time?
Again, for those listening online, Tony Life, Director of the Wildlife Division. At this stage of the game, we're talking about a proposal. And so what goes along with that proposal is then the process that we initiate with the LRC and getting draft rules in front of them. The scope of the proposal limits the end decision that can be made. The broader the proposal, the more options that are available to the Commission at finalization or when you choose to adopt. If you make a narrow proposal at this time, the opportunities to expand that at finalization aren't there. So that's where it is important, if you want to keep options open, to make as broad a proposal as possible. Now, certainly if it's outside the realm of consideration. If you don't believe that it should be a part of the decision in the end, they can be eliminated at this time. But just from the perspective of having alternatives available to you at finalization, it's best to be as broad as you can at this stage of the game.
Okay, what else? Okay, go ahead, Russ.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Olson, I have about 3 questions.
Okay.
To just ask them. Kevin, what's the, age that we have identified, or historically you've identified that we have to have a hunter for life? So somebody that's in that 12 to 17 bracket that's applying for licenses and is engaged, and whether they're successful in the applications or not, what have you identified what age group we have them at that they would carry on to continually apply and be a hunter in South Dakota?
Great question. You might have stumped me on that one. I have not quantified where we retain those hunters for life, if you will, or where we continued to have those hunters apply time and time again. I'll tell you, though, that the data we do have, when it comes to age, if we don't retain the hunter, in the early 20s, if we don't have them buying licenses past, let's say, 18 years of age, we're likely going to lose them. And what we're seeing, and what we potentially could see more of, if those 12 to 17-year-olds have a hard time drawing a license and continue having a hard time drawing a license, we could lose them, because it might take now 2 or 3, 4 years before they even draw a license in some of these units. They'll be 16, 17 years old, and everybody in this room knows how many youth activities a 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old is exposed to these this day and age, and it's a lot. I mean, hunting's probably not on the highest of their priority list. If they were to get a license when they're 12, and they have an opportunity to harvest a buck, or just go hunting with dad or mom, we might have a higher probability of retaining those hunters. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. The longer we make them wait, I would say the higher the chances, the higher the probability of us losing those hunters in the long run.
My next question is statistics as well, and I love statistics not because I can compile them, but I love to analyze the data that you and Scott Simpson and Dr. Longmire put together. So I want to ask you about, if you track how many, under our current system, how many years of being unsuccessful would an applicant have to be before we lose them? They drop off the radar forever. So say my dad is 73, and he's applied for the last 4 years for a Moody County tag, and he's unsuccessful. Do you track that, or do you have the ability to track that? Where at what point did they just give up?
Yeah, another great question. We consider that, it's called churn rate, is the actual term that's been used in the R3 movement, the recruitment, retention, reactivation. Churn rate is hard to quantify, especially with deer licenses, because of the fact they're limited. They're not unlimited, where somebody can continue applying and get a license every year. There's other reasons why they don't apply or why they quit applying. One might be they go apply somewhere else. So we actually are working on that question right now. BIT, I have a programmer writing queries probably as we speak, looking at churn rate, looking at, of those folks that are unsuccessful, how many years does it take for those folks to continue being unsuccessful before they drop out, before they don't apply for any sort of deer license? Because I can tell you that our archery licenses have gone up, and that might be a direct result of having a hard time drawing a firearm license. So there's other options. When we talk about a limited license like deer licenses are pertaining to firearm, churn rate is really hard to quantify, and we're going to work on that question. I haven't forgotten about it, and I will get you an answer, and we'll bring that forward at the September meeting if a proposal moves forward here today.
Great. And then my last question. You've stated in some of the presentations and the data that we went through, 780 interested parties responded out of the 50,000 plus emails that were sent out to, or notifications that were sent out. So 780 people said they were interested in responding to this. We've got online testimony. We had personal visits to the outreach groups that we did. Have you looked at yet what the percentage of applicants that were actually engaged in the process, or that have either give us written, oral, or more personal testimony on their preferences throughout the process? What percentage of the applicants are we talking? Do we even hit 2% that have been engaged? Not for lack of effort on your part, by the way. I mean, the way that, and I'd also compliment what Scott says, this has been an honor for me to be engaged in one of my passions as well, is deer hunting and getting more people involved in deer hunting. But you went all over the state. We've used the web, which goes all over the world. We've used many types of media, social media, to try to contact and reach out to people. But I mean, it seems to me we have such a low rate of really truly interested people that are engaged. And even I caught wind of one group that was saying, well, we don't like any of this change, so skip the video and you can go to minute XYZ and just vote or tell them what you want to do. You don't have to watch the whole video. And so that's the kind of thing that irritates me a little bit about how collective groups can thwart your data, so to speak. But if you could tell me, if you're looking at that, what's that percentage, and what's our true response rate, or what are we hearing from the folks?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, if we sent the email out to around 50,000 deer hunters, and we had a response rate. We had about 780 folks respond back to that focus group invitation. And at the end of the day, there was some overlap from the focus group invitees versus the folks that took the online survey. We can't tell you for certain what that percentage is, but we do feel there is overlap. Just reading the comments from the online versus the focus group, there was overlap there. To answer your question, be less than 2%, just the quick math in my head. To hit the 50,000 and looking at, about 1,000 respondents. And if you could maybe even go up to 3%, but I would say, statistically speaking, if we're talking about the number of folks that are engaged in this process right now, of all deer hunters across the state that reached out to the department or provided opinion and feedback, it's probably 2 to 3%.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Again, final comment, Commissioner Olson. As I said, I like statistics, and I mean, if you look at statistics, you could say that there's over 60 people in this room today, and the majority of them would support going with plan number 2. If you dove deeper, you'd see that over 50% of the people in the room were staff and probably compelled to support number 2. But you could also look at 100% of the commissioners on the working group are in support of plan number 1. So that's where I'm at, as well as Commissioner Phillips. I think that muzzleloader, it almost belongs in a primitive category on its own, and I think that for that, remind me what the math is for the number of hunters that out of the refuge deer, Custer State Park, and muzzleloader. I mean, are we really picking up that many more that it's worth the squeeze, so to speak? And so I'm also with Commissioner Phillips in supporting plan number 1. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To elaborate on your question there, at the end of the day, if from alternative 1 to alternative 2, the difference would be in alternative 1, we're taking approximately 13,750 names out of the draw buckets for those 3 seasons. With alternative 2, we'd be taking 24,600 names out of those draw buckets. And the reason that is because those 3 seasons, again, are folks that put in for multiple seasons. So sometimes their name is in there 6 different times if they apply for 6 different seasons. So their name would only be in there 1 time versus 6. That happens, quite a lot when you start adding muzzleloader refuge CSP. For those folks that only put in for muzzleloader refuge and CSP, it's right around 500, residents. There's not a lot of folks that prefer those 3 seasons and only those 3 seasons. And I use the word prefer loosely, but it's the only folks that just applied for those 3 seasons. And that seems to be a reoccurring theme. There's not a lot of them. Right around that 500 mark seems to be where we're at. But at the end of the day, looking at the 2017 applicants with alternative 2, looking at all 6 seasons, there was 77,000 names in the draw bucket. And if you look at the proposed applicants, there would be 52,000, around 600. And then if you look at the proposed number of applicants with alternative 1, which is pick from 3, again, there's about 52,000. If you look at the projected, if you look at the projected, it's 52,000. If you look at the 2017 applicants, it's about 66,000. So that's the difference, the 66,000 versus the 77,000. That would be the difference in the names you would be taking out of the draw hat.
Commissioner Jensen.
We could do this like we did the snare proposal, right? We could have alternatives. We could propose all three of them as alternatives, recognizing the department's recommendation. And then when it came to finalization, we wouldn't have any issues about could we switch from this to that, and we could make a final decision then.
Commissioner Jensen, process-wise, when we would present the draft rule changes to interim rules, or excuse me, LRC, we have to pick one. And so I would say if you wanted to do that and keep all those on the table, process-wise, it would be necessary for us to craft rule changes related to one, well, either one or two, because the third one would be no change. And so it would be necessary to have the one that we're working off of for the statutorily required processes that must be implemented to move it forward for rule adoption. So I think it could be framed in such a way that that all three options are still on the table, but we've got to focus in on one to follow the statutorily required processes.
So, following up on that, so if we went with option number 2 and comments came in negative for that proposal, and it looked like 1 would be more favorable, we would be able to amend that at finalization. And
You would, Mr. Chairman. That would be well within the scope of the notice and the draft rule changes that you would have on the table.
and would give us a little wider options to look at. Okay.
Correct.
Yes, go ahead.
Scott Phillips speaking. When will this be finalized? We don't meet next month. The next meeting is in Yankton. Can we extend it to get comments out in Deadwood, therefore having comments on both ends of the state?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Phillips, and you might notice that and apologize that we didn't draw your attention to that when we put the proposal in front of you there. But that's the way we had it crafted based on the previous conversations that we had with you and Commissioner Olson, that would be good. This is important enough that 2 hearings would be important to have, both on both sides of the state. So that's the way it's crafted anyway, if you should approve that proposal.
Okay, other comments? Commissioner Peterson.
Yes, one comment and one question. In our counties, East River, as the deer populations go up and down, our tag numbers go up and down, and our hunters have learned to accept that. I guess the hunters that have been hunting for years, I don't get complaints when McCook Lake or Minor has less. They just know that it will be next year because the numbers are down, and then when the numbers are up, then there's more tags, and that's not quite as much of a problem. Years ago, it wasn't a problem. Everybody got a tag, but they've learned to accept that, and they haven't left the hunting population. That's a comment I have. A question I have, East River people get a license for their home area. A lot of them do. A lot of them that talk to me. Then going West River, that's their treat to do, and they're concerned about which do I do? Do I hunt at home, or my favorite location with a farmer in East River, or do I just try for the Black Hills or the West River? That's what I'm hearing, and some of them are family groups, or I know groups of men that go out. We're in the farming industry, so we don't have as much opportunity. The guys have never gone out and done that, but it always sounds fun. Would it be something where the group that likes to hunt together, some of them apply for East River and some for West for their first choice, and then you just go along and you don't have a tag to fill, but it allows for the opportunity to go spend money in those places and to have that tradition that they've done for 40 years? Or what do you, explain that part to me, please.
Yes, absolutely, Commissioner Peterson. Kevin Roblin here again. Very good question, and this was a discussion topic brought up numerous times at numerous focus groups. You know, the fact that we're making hunters choose between hunting with family versus hunting with friends, because that friend hunt is usually the hunt that's away from home. The family hunt's usually the hunt that's at home. And to answer your question, you know, the first choice, first draw, if you were to put in East River, let's say, your chances of drawing it do go up based on, you know, the draw probabilities. Now, come that third draw, will there be leftover West River licenses? Absolutely there will be. There are today. Yeah, actually, in the system we have today, there are any whitetail licenses left over in that third draw period. So it is dependent upon what unit the individual's pursuing, but there is going to be a very solid chance that there will be leftover any whitetail licenses, especially available West River in the third draw, because there are today in a lot of units actually. Will there be any deer licenses left over West River in the third draw? I would probably say no to that. But if that hunter really wanted to hunt with that group of friends, you know, and there likely will be some opportunity there. And if there's not an any deer or any whitetail deer license, there absolutely probably will be an antlerless license. Our deer populations are turning the corner. We're starting to grow our populations, and we're getting more deer on the landscape. Supply can't meet demand yet, but we're always trying to grow our mule deer herd in particular, and with that growth, there will be some more license opportunities available to users. So it's so hard to say where those licenses or what licenses will be left over, but I'm fairly confident we take 25,000 names out of the draw bucket, there will be more licenses left over in that third draw.
Thank you.
Okay, Doug?
Commissioner Sharp here. It would be safe to say I don't understand all that I know about this. So having said that, what I'm hearing is statistically alternative 2 would end up with a larger number of individual deer hunters than alternative 1 or what we have today.
Well, at the end of the day, we're still going to have 35,000 successful applicants. However, those successful applicants now only might have one license. So to answer your question, alternative 2 would have a higher probability or higher chance at distributing more licenses to more users. Yes, it would. And the reason I say that is because now we're taking those folks that their names are in the draw buckets numerous times. We're only putting their name in there one time. So they're at a level playing field with all those folks that only put in the draw bucket one time. And at the end of the day, it would distribute more licenses to more individuals. Not more licenses, I shouldn't say it like that. It would distribute licenses to more individuals and not maybe the same individual. Does that make sense? I mean, that's
kind of what I'm hearing, because we could end up with 35 individual deer license holders, 35,000, whereas today under the system we might only have 27,000 people actually hunting deer. So we're upping the opportunity is what our goal is. So okay, yes. I just wanted to make sure I was hearing that correctly.
I think the best way to sum that up, Tony Life, Director of Wildlife Division, best way to sum that up would be under Alternative 1, more deer hunters are going to go deer hunting than in the current system. And under Alternative 2, even more deer hunters are going to go deer hunting that year.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Because we're going to have this comment period for, I guess, 90 days now, and because it's become clear that we can modify this proposal at the end, at the finalization, I would move forward with the proposal.
Second.
Yeah, let's clarify that, please. Is that 1, 2, or 3?
The proposal is for alternative B, and that is the alternative I'm moving forward with the recognition that we'll listen to the comments and we can constrict it. We can go to number 1 if we choose to, which I still support.
Second. Okay, further comments?
One more question also with Kathy Peterson. And if we see after going through these 90 days that we can't find a clear answer, we also can do what was number 3 by not voting for the final thing. So we've got a lot of leeway here to listen to all the hunters and then try to come to a conclusion, especially based on, and I've asked questions, but I haven't told you the work you guys have done is tremendous. And we have to have an open mind and look at everything, because you've talked to many people and given us very good information, and now it's hard to go forward knowing what to do for sure, but having these alternative things we can do will certainly help us to come to the best conclusion to help more people have opportunity.
Are you looking for a wiggle room? Is that what you're...
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to be backed into a corner.
Okay.
Wiggle room is very good.
I think if you strictly follow the statistics, Russ, the percentages on this, 70% of the people apply for one area, one license, and the options that follow through there. I think if you strictly follow those percentages, it does lead you to number 2. And so I think that's probably a good choice, but we'll see what comes in. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion would say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it is approved. All right, Rachel, tell me about dinner here. What?
We'll break from noon to 1, and bring 1 o'clock.
Okay.
You guys have a table in the back of the rain court. Your lunch is ready.
All right, it is, what time is it? It's noon, okay. All right, we'll recess till 1 o'clock then. Thank you.